Hi, my name is Lucas Safos, and this is the history of the world from Delaware. Today we're going to talk about the Atlantic slave trade and the Yukon drum. The Atlantic slave trade took place in the early modern era, which was from 1500 to 1800. During this time, gunpowder eras around the world were taking shape, and global trade and exploration uh, that was really the beginning of global trade and exploration, and huge globalization is starting to take shape, and this is when we're really starting to become one as the world, if that makes sense. But this started with the Atlantic slave trade, where European merchants purchased African slaves from African rulers and shipped them to the Americas. This is a common misnomer. We kind of were taught in grade school that Europeans would just go to Africa and find any African and chain them up, throw them on a boat, and ship them off to the Americas. But in fact, that was not the case. The slaves that were being purchased were already considered slaves, and they were just slaves to these African rulers in these separate African kingdoms. This really sparked a triangle trade route between Africa, Europe, and the Americas. Slaves would be shipped from Africa to the Americas, while rum, iron, gunpowder, and tools would be shipped to Africa from America. Europeans would ship guns, cloth, iron, and beer over to Africa, while Africa would ship gold, ivory, spices, and other hardwoods that the Europeans did not have at the time. Um, and America would ship stuff like rice, silk, tobacco, all to Europe. So this sparked a triangle trade and really accelerated Columbian exchange of how we know it today. Um, so now we're going to talk about the Yukon drum. The Yukon drum was made in West Africa. It was found in Virginia, and one of them is displayed at a museum in England. The Yukon drum was brought on slave boats from Africa to America, and it gave slaves a new language that offered solidarity, and um, very nostalgic for them. It was something from home that slaves held on to. It was also the sound of the drum was also the very beginning of what became modern jazz and blues that became prominent in the 1920s that a lot of African Americans identify with. Um, the drum was made out of wood from a tree, only found in West Africa, the Cordia africana. It only grows in West Africa. Um, Also, skin, pegs, and cords were material from around the same region. That's how we know it's from Africa, because people thought, originally historians thought that the drum was from the Americas because it was found in Virginia, but that's not the case because most of the material is found in West Africa, only in West Africa. The drum was most likely part of the chief's drum orchestra in a West African kingdom. A key element in the music and dance were fundamental to the ingredients of ceremonies and courts and all that. The way that it got to America, most likely is it was a gift from an African ruler to a European merchant that was purchasing slaves because, well, slaves didn't take anything. They didn't have any possessions. So, yeah, um, the European merchants would use the drum as kind of an instrument of control because while on the ship, that's the only sound that the slaves could hear, and it would remind them of home. So they would use that sound to and make the slaves dance, build morale, and let them not get too depressed, because in reality they did want the slaves to survive and live and make it to the Americas. The material stretched over the drum is deer skin. That's why historians originally thought that the drum was from America, because deer was only found in America at that time. And Africans and Native Americans had relations, which is not really talked about much. It's a history that's often overlooked. And Native Americans also owned plantations and slaves too. So that's also another thing we were probably kept in the dark about. That's something that I didn't know. So how does the con drum relate to the Atlantic slave trade? Well, that's easy. It's really the only thing from home that the slaves had. It was really the only sound that was familiar to them and really had like nostalgia for them. So whenever they saw that, that's really something that they would hold on to. Also, it's really a product of triangle trade and the Columbian Exchange. I mean, most of its components are from West Africa, but it was completed by a product that was only found in the Americas. So it is African, yes, the origins are African, but the final product is really a Columbian Exchange globalization type product. You know, it started in Africa, went to the Americas, and now we're seeing it in England and Europe. Those are the three regions that were part of triangle trade at the time. So why do we care? Well, the Atlantic slave trade allowed Africans to come to the Americas and further diversify the world. I mean, it might be messed up in a lot of ways how they got here, but you know, the Atlantic slave trade really kind of shaped globalization and how we live today. And the con drum, like I said earlier, it's really the foundation sound of blues and jazz that a lot of African Americans love. I love it too. And music is still used as a stress reliever today for us. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening. Seems like this won't be the last time that we're doing this, so I'll see you for my next video. Thanks.